What's it going to take to get Watson out of Houston? This is Prime Time on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, as well as Sirius XM Channel 80. It is time for us to head out to the Goodyear Hotline. I'm Emmett Golden alongside Chris Carlin, and we bring in Jake Asman of ESPN 97.5 in Houston. Jake, is there any way that Deshaun Watson is on the roster week one for the Texans?
Emmett and Chris, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, that is the $1 million question right now. Now, the conventional thought process would be the deadline for a Watson trade would be night one of the NFL draft because, in theory, his trade value would plummet for at least the regular season from that point on. But it seems like just right now the Texans are so dug in on not moving him that I don't know if conventional wisdom applies. I could see this getting ugly and the Texans not trading him come draft night, and this does carry over into the regular season. I also could see the scenario where Nick Caserio, who inherited this mess, and in hindsight, I wonder if he regrets taking this job, not fully understanding what was going on between the quarterback, the owner, and Jack Easterby. I do think there's a chance Nick Caserio could kind of see the writing on the wall and realize that the best path forward would be to trade Deshaun Watson. But there's so much unknown because it just seems like everything you hear, and I checked in with some people earlier today that are very close to the situation. It seems like the Texans' stance remains the same, that they're not trading him and that Deshaun Watson is their quarterback.
Jake, why is Jack Easterby still in the building?
It's a great question, Chris, because when you read the two Sports Illustrated reports that came out, the first one alone you would have thought would have got him fired. The second one comes out and basically rehashes a lot of the storylines and adds on to what was reported in that first story. From what I've been told, Jack Easterby has basically been able to kind of encapsulate, bubble off, isolate Cal McNair from, really, I want to say the rest of, the sports society here in Houston. It seems like McNair is so insulated, has such belief in Jack Easterby that he's just unaware of what has transpired with his organization. I don't think Watson wanting out is strictly Jack Easterby, but I think the fact that Easterby is still here, Watson was told that he was going to have input on the decision, and then he sees Jack Easterby get on a plane to New England to hire Nick Caserio as the team's next general manager. So I think Easterby is certainly responsible for a lot of what's transpired, but he has built up such a close, tight-knit relationship with the owner and Janice McNair, who actually is truly the owner of the team. Cal McNair is just the CEO. That relationship has allowed Jack Easterby to go from a character coach with New England just a few years ago to having all this influence over player personnel and be part of be a major factor as to why Nick Caserio was hired in the first place.
He is Jake Asman of ESPN at 97.5 in Houston. You're listening to Primetime on ESPN Radio. I'm Emmett Golden alongside Chris Carlin. Jake, it seems like they're rebuilding out there in Houston. Wouldn't it make sense to rip the Band-Aid off, get as much as you can for Deshaun Watson so you can kind of expedite the rebuild, because that's what they're going through right now?
I totally agree with you, Emmett. I think the Texans need to look themselves in the mirror and realize even with Deshaun Watson having, by all accounts, the best season of his career without arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL and DeAndre Hopkins, they still only won 4 games. This defense has major holes on it. They lack a running game on offense. This team no longer now has J.J. Watt on it, who's still an above-average defensive player, even at this state of his career. This team is just not very good right now. They've given out some awful contracts over the last couple of years that have put them in salary cap hell. They don't have a first or a second-round draft pick because of the Laramie Tunsil trade. So if your quarterback doesn't want to be there, and he is willing to sit out regular season games if it got to that point, I think the best thing to do if you're Nick Caserio would be, as you said, rip the Band-Aid off, try and make the best deal possible if you're the Texans, and maybe that best deal possible gets you back a king's ransom. Maybe you get the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins to bid against themselves to give you 3 or 4 first-round picks potentially. I just think the longer this goes, if they're going to really, be set on not trading him, then they better be set on not trading him throughout the entire season next year, knowing that his value, once we get to draft night, will take a hit until the following offseason.
And also knowing that it's going to be a storyline for them for the entire season, which is really an impossible situation to put a first-year general manager and a first-year head coach in, Jake. Jake Asman, 97.5, Houston, ESPN joining us. With all of that said, where's the breaking point? Where does it actually happen that the decision is going to be made one way or another here, Jake? Because they can dig their heels in the sand in late February, but that doesn't mean anything until they do get till late April.
You're absolutely right, Chris. To me, the deadline is still night one of the NFL draft. If they don't blink then I would expect Nick Caserio, who's known to be a tough negotiator, but that's with contracts, not with something like this with Deshaun Watson, then I think the Texans would be prepared to take the backlash, take all the heat that's going to be on them throughout the season, the distraction it could cause in the locker room. I think they'd be willing to deal with it out of spite and just stubbornness if they don't trade him by April 29th. That's how this organization has operated over the last calendar year. I think Cal McNair is too insulated to really truthfully understand that Deshaun Watson is never playing for the organization again. I don't think that has clicked just yet. So I think if he's not dealt, the week leading up to the draft, even the night of the draft, I think this is a story that's not going away anytime soon from that point forward.
Now, Jake, obviously, if they're going to send a quarterback away, they may want one in return to kind of get them over the hump. Of the guys that are available, who do you think is the most attractive to the Houston Texans?
So that's a complicated question because this has not really been put out there that much nationally. So if the Texans hypothetically were to trade Deshaun Watson, let's say to the Jets for the second overall pick, a complicated factor in all this is, let's say they really like Justin Fields coming out of college and they make that deal with the Jets and they could sit there and get their Watson replacement. Justin Fields is represented by David Mulugeta. Mulugeta is the same agent that currently represents Deshaun Watson. So would that prevent the Texans from drafting Fields? Would that be a factor in all this? Zach Wilson's agent is the same agent that is represented by Bill O'Brien. It did not end well here in Houston, of course, between Bill O'Brien, Jack Easterby, and Cal McNair. So is that a factor in all this? So, as much as Texans fans, if they have to trade Deshaun Watson, would love to see a huge haul, and they could use some of those picks, of course, in the top three if it's the Jets or the Dolphins and draft their replacement. There's some thought here internally that could, the factors with the agents for those two players coming out could impact the trade. And I still just don't know if the Texans really want, a Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade with the Niners or a Teddy Bridgewater in a trade with the Panthers. I don't think the Texans will ever be able to justify trading Deshaun Watson with the return they get, but they certainly would not be able to do it if they're getting back Garoppolo or Teddy Bridgewater in a deal. It takes major draft compensation to get this done, which is why I think if you're Nick Caserio, you try and get the Jets and the Dolphins to bid against themselves and see if you can get those two to create a bidding war, supply and demand, and get the best offer for Deshaun Watson.
Well, as we know, Jake, the mark of any great organization is a high amount of spite. And that's really where it's going to come from here for the Texans. Not only spite among keeping Deshaun Watson, but all that you just mentioned when it comes to these agents. It's unimaginable that they have put themselves in this situation and that you're a CEO and you're unable to remove yourself from what is the perceived problem right in front of you. There can't be a way, can there, that Cal McNair honestly doesn't know that Easterby is a big problem, or the way that they are perceived as owners is a big problem right now. Is there?
Yeah, you would think that there'd be some sort of self-awareness here. But if you go back to that Sports Illustrated story that recently came out detailing, the inner workings of the organization since Jack Easterby was hired by Bill O'Brien, and then, of course, Brian Gaine, the GM at the time, gets fired, and that's really over the last, year and a half where the Texans have kind of spiraled out of control from that point on when Easterby arrived. One of the notes in that story, Chris, was that Cal McNair is referred to by Texans employees as Tommy Boy, So you just that's the knock on the guy in the building. That
well, the problem here, though, Jake, is Tommy saved the company. I don't know that Cal's going to be saving the Texans.
That was the point I was about to make, Chris. You're spot on. At least Tommy Boy got it done at the end of the film. I don't see the solution here where Cal McNair is able to get Deshaun Watson, where the two of them get in a room together. They sing Kumbaya, and Deshaun's playing quarterback for the Texans again. I don't see that scenario unfolding.
Yeah, the model car is on fire on the desk right now.
Yes, it's all bad down there in Houston. Jake, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight.
Guys, big fan of you both. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.